Welcome to part 2 of our slideshow on the Parthenon and our study of Greek architecture. Again, you have a note sheet where you're keeping your answers to these questions, but our overall question is the one at the end. What does the Parthenon tell us about Greek beliefs and values? In the first video, we looked at the history of the Parthenon and we looked at its architectural or structural features, but in this video we're going to look at the Parthenon's artistic features, its decoration, and what's on the inside of the building. On the inside of the building is a colossal 38-foot tall statue of Athena made of gold and ivory. That's because, as in every Greek temple, the building has a public purpose, which is to house the community goddess or god. The original here was destroyed, but we know about it from ancient Greek writings and from Roman copies that were passed down later. The Parthenon was designed to house and fit this enormous statue, which is why it has to be 8 columns wide rather than the standard 6 of previous Greek temples. Athena here is fully clothed. She's carrying a spear and a shield and holding a winged Nike. That's the goddess of victory. I wonder if you can, make some hypothesis here. Why do you think Athena is holding Nike, the goddess of victory? Last thing I'll say about this is that we know the sculptor's name. His name was Phidias. He signed his name to this work. He wanted the glory and the credit for it. This is not like previous artists, say from ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, who would never sign their names on a statue of a god or goddess because the purpose of that work is to honor the god or goddess. But here, the sculptor himself is taking a little bit of the honor. Here are blueprints showing the layout of the building, its walls in these solid lines here, and its columns. Each circle here represents a column. The statue was on the inside in a room behind an interior set of columns. It would have been dark in here, but she would have been illuminated by a reflecting pool in front of her. Notice also the treasury in the back. That's where all the money collected from Athens' allies would have been stored. Here's another view of a different reconstruction. This photo gives you a really great sense of the scale and how large the statue was. If you look closely, you see that this is not just simply a statue to honor Athena. On the soles of her sandals, for example, are scenes of humans fighting centaurs. Centaurs are these mythical half-man, half-horse figures. On the outside of her shield, seen here, are scenes of humans battling Amazons, mythical female warriors. Why is this here? Isn't this supposed to be a temple home for the goddess Athena? Why is it full of images of humans fighting foreign creatures? These images of Greeks victorious against foreign creatures, of centaurs or Amazons, it's a powerful visual metaphor for the Greek victory over the Persians and a celebration of their successful defense of their independence and their way of life. So, while the Parthenon may be partly for Athena, it's also a temple to the Athenians themselves. You can also see the Athenians celebrating themselves and their victory over the Persians on the outside of the building. Underneath the pediment, which is this triangular part which supports the roof, there's a band running around the entire building that features something called triglyphs and metopes. Triglyphs are these three vertical stripes, and the space in between each triglyph is a square canvas, which is called a metope. This is a common decorative element in Greek temples, but no other temple has so many. There are 92 total metopes running around the building. How large do you think these metope spaces are? This illustration gives you some view of the actual scale of the metopes. They're squares and they're about 1.2 meters on each side. Originally, they were filled with carvings like the ones shown here. Notice that most of the decorative features of the building, like triglyphs and metopes, would have been painted bright colors. In fact, the whole building would have had a very different visual effect in color. All of this color upsets some people today who like to think of ancient Greek art as all white, which can be problematic when used to support the idea that the ancient Greeks themselves were all white. Ancient Greece and Rome were actually quite diverse, and the concept of whiteness didn't have much meaning thousands of years ago. People didn't categorize other people by skin color in ways that have become non-inclusive in our own modern world. But back to the point about metopes. Each side of the Parthenon depicts a different scene or set of events within its collection of metopes. The north, for example, shows famous scenes of an ancient Greek mythological battle of the Greeks versus the Trojans. And on the western side, there are lots more scenes of Greeks fighting the Amazons. Clearly, the Athenians like to show off all the spats that they got into, but maybe that's not surprising given that Athena, to whom the temple is dedicated, is a war goddess. In all but one of these metope fights, the Greeks are, of course, winning. This scene, however, is a rare instance in which the Greeks are not winning. One poor guy down here is being trampled by a centaur. Why? Why do you think that they have this one scene of defeat? Well, perhaps one interpretation is that the Athenians are trying to remind themselves that the battles that they have won have not been easy, and that many losses and lots of suffering occurred, such as in the war against Persia. Let's see another example of this Athenian home team pride. One peculiar irregularity of the Parthenon is in the way that it blends two Greek styles. Generally, in Greek architecture, a building follows a certain style or order. Strangely, the Parthenon combines styles. The two most famous Greek styles are what's called Doric, which you see here, and Ionic on this side. What stylistic differences do you notice here? First, I think the most obvious is the columns. You can see from the capital, that is the crown on top of the column, very different styles, right? The Doric is plain and simple. It's often described as masculine, whereas the Ionic is more curly-cued and delicate. The Doric has triglyphs and metopes running across underneath the pediment, whereas the Ionic has something called a frieze, which is just one continuous scroll or scene. Here's a better view of these elements, which also gives you their architectural names. Quiz time! Which order is the Lincoln Memorial? I hope you got it. It is Doric. The giveaway here is the tops of the columns, the capitals of the columns, but you can also notice some triglyphs and metopes here. It's slightly different from the Greek form, but it's following the same pattern. Okay, so the Parthenon mixes both orders. On the outside, you have typical Doric with the triglyphs and metopes. But on the inside, though it's Doric columns, you have an Ionic frieze. The Doric and Ionic orders are named for different groups of Greeks. This map shows the different groups, which spoke different dialects of the Greek language. They had different accents. Generally speaking, the Dorics lived on the mainland Greek peninsula, whereas the Ionics, shown in purple here, sort of ringed the Aegean Sea over into Asia Minor. What does it mean that, unlike any previous Greek temple, the Parthenon tries to combine both styles? What is Athens saying here? One interpretation suggests that this is Pericles' way of saying that the Athenians were leaders of all the Greeks. So in addition to filling the building with imagery that celebrates themselves as winners in the war against the Persians, the Athenians are also talking to the Greeks and reminding them of their superiority. They, the Athenians, are the ones who won the war on behalf of all Greeks. They, the Athenians, are now the leaders of all Greeks. One last example to show how the Parthenon is really a memorial to the Athenians themselves and a symbol of Athenian pride, the pediments. They are mostly missing now. They've been destroyed, but we know that they were originally full of fantastic sculptural stories. One side shows the birth of Athena, but the other side shows a contest between Athena and Poseidon to decide who would become the patron god of Athens. Athena won, obviously, but notice the figures off to the sides here. These are the Athenians themselves serving as judges. This is a little strange, as humans had not previously been depicted on temples to gods, but here they are occupying the same space as the gods. The story on the inner frieze takes this a step even further, running around all four sides of the building. It's 160 meters in length. It includes 380 figures and 220 animals. Most of them are horses. That frieze depicts or shows a festival parade in honor of Athena. This festival took place every 4 years in Athens. Wait, so let's think about this. On a temple to Athena, the Athenians devote 160 meters of space to showing themselves honoring Athena. You'd never have a Christian church full of pictures of Christians celebrating, or a mosque full of paintings of Muslims praying. This was strange even for the Greeks. It's the first time that a human event is depicted on a Greek temple. As one art historian put it, the Athenians judged themselves fit for inclusion in the temple's sculptural decoration. It's an example of the Athenians' extraordinary high sense of self-worth. Not only are the Athenians the center of attention here, in this remarkable scene from the frieze, you have the gods. But where are they? They're sitting off to the side. They're a mere sideshow. They're observers, they're bystanders. The missing figure here is thought to be Aphrodite, and she's pointing out to her son to draw her son's attention as though she's saying, look at those marvelous Athenians. This is a quote by the same art historian. Indeed, the Athenian people were important, self-important, one might say. They were masters of an empire, a picture of Athens that elevated its citizens almost to the stature of gods. The Parthenon celebrated the greatness of Athens and the Athenians as much as it honored Athena. So there you have it. Let's return to our central question, which I hope that now you feel confident about addressing. In what ways does the Parthenon tell us about Greek beliefs and values?